My daughter-in-law smiled sweetly and asked, "So, Mom, who's the beneficiary on your life insurance?" I looked her in the eyes and said calmly, "I changed it to my dog." She laughed, but when I showed her the document, her face went white. Because what she read there: "Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin." "So, Mom," Chloe said, her voice a perfect blend of sweetness and casual inquiry. She leaned forward, the delicate china teacup poised in her manicured hands. The afternoon sun cut across my living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing above the lemon cake she'd brought. With everything going on, I was thinking, who's the beneficiary on your life insurance policy? The air in the room did not change temperature. The clock on the mantel did not stop ticking. But something shifted, a subtle realignment I felt in my bones. It was the tone. It was the specific, eager tilt of her head. This was not a question born from concern for my well-being or estate planning. It was an audit. Across from her, my son Robert chuckled, looking up from his phone. "Chloe, really? Is that appropriate tea time conversation?" "Oh, hush," she said, smiling that wide, empty smile that never reached her eyes. "We're family. There should be no secrets. It's just practical. Right, Mom?" She called me Mom. She had from the beginning. I used to think it was charming, an effort to bridge a gap. Now I understood it was a claim staker, a verbal fence placed around what she considered future property. I took a slow sip of my Earl Grey, letting the fragrant steam warm my face for a moment. I placed the cup back on its saucer with a soft, precise click. I met her gaze, holding it. I saw the calculation there, the impatience masquerading as attentive care. "I changed it," I said, my voice calm and even. A simple statement of fact. Chloe's smile tightened at the edges. "Changed it? From Robert, you mean? Well, that's fine. I'm sure you have your reasons. A charity, perhaps." "Not a charity," I said. Robert shifted in his wingback chair, now paying full attention. A faint line of confusion appeared between his brows. "Then who, Mom? Auntie May, you know she's comfortable." I shook my head once. I kept my eyes on Chloe. I wanted to see the moment the understanding hit. "No, I changed the beneficiary to my dog." Silence. It was a thick, palpable thing. Robert's mouth opened, then closed. He processed the words, his brain struggling to categorize them. A joke? A sign of cognitive decline? He settled on a weak, bewildered smile. Chloe, however, did not smile. The pretense of pleasant curiosity evaporated from her face, replaced by a blank, stunned incomprehension. Then came the laugh. It was a sharp, brittle sound like ice cracking. "Your dog. You're giving your life insurance to your dog." She said it not to me, but to the room, as if announcing absurdity to an invisible jury. "To Sir Barks-a-Lot, yes," I confirmed. In the corner by the hearth, the subject of the discussion lifted his graying muzzle at the sound of his name. His tail gave two soft thumps against the rug. "You're joking," Chloe stated, her voice regaining some of its practiced composure, laced now with a patronizing dismissiveness. "That's a funny one, Mom, really. But seriously, who did you name?" "I am being serious," I said. "The paperwork is filed. It's legal and binding." Her veneer cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but I saw it. A flush crept up her neck. "You can't be serious. That's ridiculous. What about Robert? What about your grandchildren's future?" She gestured vaguely, as if conjuring the specter of college funds and down payments. "Robert is a successful man," I said, glancing at my son. He looked caught, a spectator in a play he didn't audition for. "He built his future with my support, with his father's legacy, and with his own 2 hands. He doesn't need my life insurance." "But the money," Chloe started. "Is mine," I finished for her, the words crisp and final. "To allocate as I see fit." She leaned back, crossing her arms. The sweet daughter-in-law was gone, receding like a tide, leaving behind something harder and sharper on the shore. "So let me get this straight. You would leave a substantial sum of money to an animal rather than to your own flesh and blood, to your son's family? It is not about rather than, I said, feeling a familiar, cold steadiness settle in my chest. This was ground I had walked in my mind many times. It is about where the love and responsibility truly lie. Barks depends on me. His well-being, his comfort is my direct responsibility. Ensuring that continues is a logical decision. Logical? The word burst from her, laced with derision. It's senile, it's wasteful. Chloe! Robert finally found his voice, a note of shocked reproach in it. Well, it is, she insisted, turning to him. We're talking about real resources here, Robert, for your children, and she wants to leave it to a pet. She said the word pet like it was something unclean. I watched my son look at his wife. I saw the flicker in his eyes, not of agreement, but of a dawning, uncomfortable awareness. He was seeing the performance slip, and he didn't know what to do with the actor beneath. I have the documentation here, I said, cutting through their silent exchange. I did not rise quickly. I moved with the deliberate pace I have cultivated over 68 years. I walked to my writing desk, an old oak piece that had been my husband's. I unlocked the top drawer with a small key from my pocket. The action was ritualistic, purposeful. I extracted a single folder. I returned to my seat and placed it on the coffee table between us. It was a plain manila folder, but its presence was heavier than the silver tea service. Go on, I said. See for yourself. Chloe stared at the folder as if it were a live snake. Her ambition warred with her disbelief. Slowly, she uncrossed her arms and reached for it. Her fingers were less steady now. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper on top, the beneficiary designation change form from the insurance company. It was very official. There was the policy number. There was my signature, witnessed and notarized. And there, in the clean-typed box labeled Primary Beneficiary, the trust of Sir Barksalot Beaumont. Her eyes scanned the line once, twice. The color drained from her face, leaving 2 spots of high, angry red on her cheeks. The paper made a slight rustling sound in her grip. She looked from the document to me, her expression a muddle of fury and utter confusion. It's real, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Of course it is, I said. I do not say things I do not mean. Robert stood up and came around to look over her shoulder. He read the line. He let out a long, slow breath. Wow, Mom, you really did it. I told you I did. Chloe slapped the paper back onto the table. The pleasant afternoon was in ruins around us. The illusion of familial tea shattered. This is an insult, she said, her voice low and tight. It is not an insult to you, I replied, gathering the document and returning it to its folder. It is a choice for him. My affairs are in order. This is simply one part of that order. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. We should go, Robert. I'm not feeling well. Robert looked from her rigid back to me, his face a canvas of apology and bewilderment. Mom, we'll talk later, okay? Of course, I said. I remained seated. I did not get up to see them out. It was a small thing, a break in protocol, but it felt significant. I listened as they moved through the hall. I heard the sharp click of Chloe's heels, the muffled, tense exchange at the door, then the sound of it closing too firmly. Silence returned to the house, deeper now. The sun had moved, leaving my living room in softer shadow. Barks pushed himself up and padded over to me, resting his chin on my knee. I looked down into his warm, brown eyes, so full of simple devotion. There was no calculation there, no ledger of favors owed or future gains expected. I placed a hand on his head. It's just you and me, old friend, I said quietly. The confrontation was over. The first move had been made, and it was mine. The cold, steady feeling in my chest was not anger. It was resolve. She had asked for transparency, and I had given it to her. She just hadn't liked what she saw. This was not the end. It was, I knew, only the very beginning of the unraveling, and I was prepared for every single thread of it. The silence they left behind was not empty. It was full of the echo of Chloe's sharp exit and Robert's bewildered apology. I sat for a long moment, my hand still resting on Barks's head, feeling the solid reality of his warmth. The tea on the table had gone cold, forming a faint skin on the surface. I looked at the folder still in my lap. The plain manila cover gave no hint of the quiet revolution it contained. I stood and returned to the writing desk. The key was still in the lock. I opened the drawer, not to put the folder away, but to look beneath it. Underneath several layers of ordinary household papers, warranties, old tax returns, was a second, thicker folder. This one was dark blue, heavy with legal weight. I removed it and placed both folders side by side on the desk's polished surface. The blue folder held the complete architecture of my decision. The beneficiary form was just the simplest part, the public declaration. Beneath it lay the trust documents drafted by my lawyer, Ms. Jenkins. They specified the care, the trustee, the detailed instructions for Barks's maintenance. There were veterinary directives, a fund for his food and grooming, even a clause for his eventual passing and the disposition of any remaining funds. It was meticulous. It was, as Ms. Jenkins had said with a satisfied nod, bulletproof. I heard a car engine start outside, the familiar sound of Robert's sedan pulling away. I did not go to the window. I listened until the sound faded into the ambient noise of the neighborhood. Only then did I allow myself to sit in the desk chair, the old leather sighing under my weight. The clock on the mantel ticked, a steady, patient sound that had measured decades in this house. The phone in my pocket vibrated. I did not need to look to know it was not Robert. He would stew in his car, trying to piece together what had happened, trying to find a path between his wife's outrage and his mother's calm certainty. The call was from Chloe. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I placed the phone on the desk, screen down. It rang again 30 seconds later. This time, I answered. "Yes, Chloe." Her voice was a strained wire, all the false sweetness stripped away. "We need to talk seriously." "We just did," I said, my eyes on the trust documents. "That wasn't a talk. That was you making a ridiculous announcement. I'm in the car. I'm turning around." "I don't think that's a good idea." "I don't care what you think is a good idea." The words erupted, harsh and tinny through the speaker. I heard Robert's voice in the background, a muffled protest. She ignored him. "You cannot do this. It is not rational. We are coming back." "If you come back, you will not be let in," I said, my voice level. "This conversation is over." "You listen to me," she began, but I ended the call. I powered the phone off. The sudden, absolute quiet was a relief. Barks had followed me and lay now at my feet, a comforting weight against my slippers. I looked at the dog, then at the documents. This was the paper trail. This was the evidence of my will, translated into the cold, impartial language of law. It was no longer a feeling or a private resolution. It was fact. I knew what would happen next. The disbelief would curdle into rage. The rage would seek a weakness. She would try to find one in Robert, in guilt, in familial obligation. She would research frantically to see if such a thing could be challenged. She would discover that it could not successfully. The realization would not calm her. It would inflame her further. I opened the blue folder to a specific page. It was the designation of the trustee and successor trustee. The primary trustee was not me, of course, but a woman named Gloria Henderson, an old friend from my nursing days, a genuine dog lover who lived on a small farm upstate. The successor trustee was a professional fiduciary service. Nowhere in the documents were the names Robert, Chloe, or their children mentioned. Their absence was a calculated void. I heard a car door slam, too soon for them to have driven home and back. Then another. Footsteps, rapid and sharp on my front walk. A furious knocking on the door, not a ring of the bell. Barks lifted his head and gave a low woof of alarm. I placed a calming hand on him. "It's all right," I murmured. I did not move from the desk. The knocking persisted, then became a pounding. "Eleanor, open this door. We know you're in there." It was Chloe's voice, shrill against the quiet afternoon. I remained seated. I looked at the folders before me, at the tangible proof of my autonomy. The pounding continued. I heard Robert's voice now, lower, trying to placate her. "Chloe, stop. This isn't helping. She can't just do this. She can't lock us out." But I could. It was my house, my policy, my decision. After a full minute, the pounding stopped. I heard arguing, voices pitched low but intense on my front porch. I could not make out the words, only the cadence of conflict. Finally, I heard Robert say, clear and firm, "We're leaving. Now." The footsteps receded. Car doors opened and closed. This time, the engine started with an angry roar, and the car sped away, the sound fading quickly. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. The confrontation had been moved from my living room to my doorstep, but it was the same confrontation. The document had made it real for her, and reality was something she intended to fight. I closed the blue folder and locked both it and the manila one back in the drawer. The key returned to my pocket. The action was final. The trail was laid. She had seen the first page, the beneficiary form. She had no idea of the fortress of paperwork that lay behind it, protecting my simple, deliberate choice. I stood and walked to the front window, parting the lace curtain just enough to see. The porch was empty. The street was quiet. The only evidence of the turmoil was the faint, lingering echo of her anger in the still air. I let the curtain fall back into place. The battle lines were not drawn in sand. They were typed on legal paper, signed, notarized, and filed. Let her rage against that. I had built my walls not from emotion, but from precedent and clause. And I was, for the first time in a long while, perfectly secure behind them. The next move was hers, but the board, I knew, was already in my favor. The silence after their car peeled away felt deeper, more permanent. I left my phone off. The house was a sealed chamber, and I preferred it that way. I fed Barks his dinner, prepared a simple meal for myself, and tried to read. The words on the page held no meaning. My mind was not on the novel, but on the inevitable next act. It arrived later that evening, not with a phone call, but with the slow, hesitant crunch of gravel under tires. A single car, Robert's. The headlights swept across the front window and went dark. I watched from the living room as he got out alone, his shoulders slumped. He stood for a moment by his car as if gathering courage, then walked to the door. This time, he rang the bell. I considered not answering, but this was Robert, my son. The oblivious, well-meaning link between two opposing forces. I turned on the porch light and opened the door. He looked exhausted. "Mom," he said, his voice raw, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered, the familiar scent of his cologne mixing with the night air. He didn't go to the living room. He stood awkwardly in the foyer. "She's at home. She's upset." "I gathered," I said, closing the door. I walked to the kitchen. "Tea? Do you have anything stronger?" I took out 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon my husband had kept for special occasions. This qualified. I poured 2 fingers for each of us. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped him with his homework decades ago. He drank half his glass in one go, wincing slightly. "She's been researching all afternoon, contesting wills, mental capacity, undue influence." "I'm sure she has," I said, sipping my drink. The warmth spread through my chest. "She thinks you're not yourself." He couldn't look at me. "Do you think that, Robert?" He finally met my eyes. "I don't know what to think. A dog, Mom? Really? It's just so out of character." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it simply that you never saw the character clearly?" Before he could answer, the sound of another car driving too fast interrupted us. Tires skidded slightly on the gravel. Car doors slammed, 2 of them. Robert's face paled. "I told her to stay home. I told her I would handle this." You cannot handle what is not yours to handle, I said, standing up. I left my glass on the table. Chloe burst through the front door without ringing. The children were with her, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6, both looking sleepy and confused in their pajamas. She had brought them. A tactical move, I realized instantly. Human shields, an appeal to sentiment. You see, she said to Robert, her voice trembling with performative emotion. You see what she's driving us to. I had to bring them. I couldn't leave them alone with this tension hanging over us. The children shuffled in, looking at their father. Daddy? The girl whispered. It's okay, sweetheart, Robert said, his voice pained. He went to them, shepherding them toward the living room couch. Just sit here for a minute. Chloe ignored them, advancing on me in the kitchen doorway. The mask was not just slipped, it was discarded. Her eyes were hard, her mouth a thin line. All pretense of sweetness was gone. We need to end this now, Eleanor, this foolishness. There is nothing to end, I said. The matter is settled. Settled? She let out a short, harsh laugh. You're giving $250,000 to a dog, a stupid animal that will be dead in a few years. In the living room, Barks, who had been lying on his bed, lifted his head at the raised voice. Robert stood up. Chloe, don't. No, Robert, I'm done tiptoeing. This is insane. It's an insult to you, to me, and to your children. She gestured wildly toward the living room. What about their college? What about the help we were counting on? We've done everything for you. The air left the room. Robert stared at her. I simply waited. Everything? I asked, my voice quiet. Yes, we invite you for holidays. We bring the kids over. I call you every week. We've included you in our lives. And this is how you repay that? By throwing your money away on a pet? Robert found his voice. It was low, disbelieving. You were counting on her life insurance? For our kids' college? Chloe faltered for a second, realizing her mistake, but the momentum of her anger was too great. It's not about counting on it. It's about principle. It's family money. It should stay in the family, not go to some animal shelter. So it is about the money, Robert said. It wasn't a question. It's about legacy, about respect, she cried, but the words rang hollow now. The calculation was exposed, naked and ugly in the bright kitchen light. I looked past her at my grandchildren on the couch, confused and tired. I looked at my son, whose face was a landscape of shock and dawning horror. Then I looked back at Chloe. You have done those things, I acknowledged. The weekly calls that last 5 minutes, the holiday invitations where I bring half the meal, the visits where you check your phone more often than you look at me. These are not investments, Chloe. They are not deposits in a bank account you can withdraw from upon my death. They are the bare minimum of human decency, and you have tallied them up as if they were a debt I owe you. She was speechless, her mouth opening and closing. My life, I continued, my work, my savings, my policy, these are mine, the result of shifts I worked while you were in grade school, of sacrifices made long before you entered the picture. You are not owed a dividend from a life you did not build. Robert put his head in his hands. My God, Chloe, he murmured. The little girl on the couch began to cry quietly, overwhelmed by the anger in the air. The sound broke the spell. Chloe turned on Robert, her face twisted. And you're just going to sit there and let her do this? Stand up for your family. Robert lifted his head. He looked at his wife, then at his crying daughter. Something in him solidified. Take the kids, he said, his voice flat. Take them home, now. Robert, now. The word was a command I had never heard from my gentle son. Chloe flinched. She stared at him, seeing an ally transformed into an obstacle. For a moment, pure hatred flashed in her eyes, directed at us both. Then she stormed into the living room, grabbing the children's hands. Come on, we're leaving. Your grandmother has made her choice. She dragged them out. The front door slammed with a force that shook the house. Robert didn't move. The silence that followed was different from before. It was the silence after a storm has passed, revealing the damage. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a painful clarity. She really thought she was owed it. "Yes," I said, "all this time." "You weren't meant to see it," I said. "Today you did." He nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. The unraveling was complete. The mask was on the floor, and neither of us could pretend it wasn't there. The conflict was no longer beneath the surface. It was in the room with us, and it had a name. Robert stayed for another hour. We did not speak much. The bourbon glass between his hands turned slowly, a focal point for his confusion. I cleared the kitchen, washing the 2 glasses, wiping the table. The domestic routine was a necessary anchor. He finally left, his goodbye a mumbled promise to call tomorrow. I locked the door behind him. The house was truly empty now. The echoes of Chloe's venomous words and the children's confused tears had dissipated, leaving a vacuum. It was not a peaceful quiet, it was a waiting quiet. I walked through the rooms, turning off lights. My feet carried me not to my bedroom, but to the small, formal sitting room we rarely used. It held the furniture from another era, and on the bookshelf, the leather-bound albums. I turned on a single lamp. The light pooled on the shelf. I pulled out the oldest album, its cover cracked with age. I sat in the high-backed chair my husband had loved, the one he called his thinking chair. I opened the album on my lap. The first photograph was not a happy one. It was a picture of me, aged 24, in my nurse's cap and uniform, taken by a colleague on a rare break. I looked exhausted. My eyes were shadowed, but my posture was straight. That was the year I worked double shifts at the county hospital. The extra money was for 2 things: paying off my student loans and putting a down payment on this house. The house was a foreclosure, smelling of damp and neglect. Every smile in later pictures was built on the foundation of those 16-hour days. I turned the page. A wedding photo. James, handsome and serious in his suit, his arm around me. We looked like children playing dress-up, but our eyes were old with determination. We had a plan, a home, stability, a family. He worked as a foreman at a printing plant. His hands were always slightly stained with ink. He would come home tired, but he would always ask about my day first. We built our life with those tired hours, stacking them like bricks. The next pages showed Robert, a baby, a toddler, a gap-toothed boy, pictures at birthdays, Christmases, school plays. I traced the outline of my younger self in those photos. The smile was genuine, but the fatigue was a permanent resident in the lines around my eyes. James and I tag-teamed. I worked night shifts so I could be home when Robert got out of school. James took the early shift. We passed each other in the hallway like ships in the night, exchanging a kiss and a briefing on our son's needs. The pictures of James grew fewer, then stopped. There was a 10-year gap in the album that no photos could fill. The cancer was swift and brutal, pancreatic. He was gone in 6 months. The pictures resumed after that, but they were different. Just me and Robert. Me at his high school graduation, my pride a fierce ache in my chest. Me helping him move into his college dorm, the room small and chaotic. The money from James's life insurance paid for that education. Every penny was allocated, a legacy from a father who wouldn't see his son become a man. I turned more pages. Robert's wedding. There I was, in a lavender dress, standing beside Chloe in her white gown. She was smiling brilliantly at the camera. In the photo, my smile was polite, reserved. Even then, I felt it, the subtle shift. She was not joining our family. She was acquiring a new branch for her own. I dismissed it as nerves, as the natural friction of a new dynamic. The most recent pictures were of the grandchildren, birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese, school recitals. In many, I am on the periphery, holding a cake or clapping in the audience. Chloe is always at the center, orchestrating the moment for the camera. The visits she spoke of were these, crowded, noisy events where meaningful conversation was impossible. The weekly calls were calendar reminders, 5 minutes of weather talk and vague plans. I closed the album. The ledger was clear in my mind. On one side, decades of labor, of love expressed through action and sacrifice, of quiet loneliness after James died, of building something that could endure. On the other side, perfunctory calls, obligatory invitations, and a smile that never warmed the eyes. Chloe spoke of what she had done for me. She had performed the motions of family, but she had never sat with me in this quiet room and asked about James. She had never inquired about the years of nursing, the patients I had loved and lost. She had never understood that the value of this house was not in its market price, but in the sheer number of shifts it represented. I looked at my hands, resting on the worn leather. These hands had held newborns and the hands of the dying. They had changed bedpans and counted medication. They had planted the garden out back, every flower a tribute to James. They had held my son when he cried. They now stroked the head of a dog who asked for nothing but companionship. The cold resolve I felt earlier warmed into something else, a profound, unshakable certainty. This was not vengeance born of spite. It was justice, born of accounting. I had tallied the ledger of my life, and I found the balance did not lie with those who felt entitled to its proceeds, but with the silent, loyal creature who represented its purest reward, simple, uncomplicated love. Barks padded into the room, his nails clicking on the hardwood. He came to my side and rested his head on my knee, just as he had earlier. I looked from the photo album to his trusting face. "It was never about the money, was it, boy?" I said softly. He thumped his tail once. It was about autonomy. It was about declaring, in the most unambiguous terms possible, that my life's work was mine to bequeath, that love could not be itemized on an invoice, that some debts of the heart are paid in a currency greed cannot comprehend. I placed the album back on the shelf. The past was in order. It was a closed book, its lessons learned. The present was a fortress of legal documents, and the future, for the first time since James died, felt entirely my own. I turned off the lamp and walked to my bedroom, Barks following at my heels. The quiet was no longer waiting. It was peaceful. It was mine. The morning after Robert's visit and my review of the past dawned clear and cool. The certainty I had felt in the quiet of the night remained, a solid foundation. Today was not a day for reflection. It was a day for action, for cementing the architecture of my decision. I dressed with care, choosing a navy suit I hadn't worn in years. It still fit. I secured my gray hair in its usual elegant twist. I looked like a woman who handled her business. Before leaving, I went to the writing desk. I unlocked the drawer and retrieved the dark blue folder. I also gathered my most recent financial statements and the original insurance policy. I placed them all in a sturdy leather portfolio. I then called a taxi. I would not ask Robert for a ride, and my own driving was reserved for short, familiar trips these days. The law offices of Jenkins and Associates were downtown, in a modern building of steel and glass. The ride was quiet. I watched the suburbs give way to the city center, the world moving at a faster pace. I paid the driver and entered the cool, marble-floored lobby. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was smooth and silent. The reception area was sleek but welcoming. A young man at the desk greeted me. "Eleanor Beaumont to see Miss Jenkins," I said. "She's expecting you, right this way." He led me down a corridor with framed abstract art to a corner office with a stunning view of the city. Valerie Jenkins stood up from behind a large, uncluttered desk. She was a black woman in her 50s, her hair in neat, silver-streaked braids, her demeanor one of sharp intelligence wrapped in calm professionalism. We had met 2 years ago, when I first decided to revise my estate plans. She had asked pointed questions, listened without judgment, and crafted solutions without flinching. "Eleanor," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm. "It's good to see you. Please sit." I took the chair across from her. "Thank you for fitting me in, Valerie." "Of course. You said on the phone there had been a revelation." She sat, folding her hands on the desk. Her eyes were attentive, missing nothing. "The beneficiary change has been disclosed," I said. "The reaction was as expected, hostile. The daughter-in-law is now aware the document is real. I anticipate she will look for avenues of challenge." Valerie gave a small, knowing nod. She reached for a file on her desk, a matching counterpart to my own. "Then let's review the fortifications, shall we?" She opened it. "We'll start with the life insurance beneficiary designation. It's irrevocable. You, as the policy owner, have the absolute right to name any beneficiary you choose. An animal is an unusual choice, but it is not illegal. The proceeds will be paid to the trust upon your death. That is straightforward and uncontestable, barring proof of fraud or duress, which does not exist." "It does not," I confirmed. "Now the trust." She turned a page. "The Sir Barks-a-Lot Beaumont Trust. We have established you as the initial trustee. Upon your passing, trusteeship passes immediately to Gloria Henderson, your named successor trustee. You have provided me with her sworn affidavit confirming her understanding and acceptance of the role, which is filed here. She is a competent adult with no conflicts of interest. The trust is funded by the insurance proceeds and any additional assets you choose to pour over." "What are the specific directives?" I asked, though I had memorized them. Valerie read from the document, her voice clear and devoid of sentiment. "The trust's purpose is the care, maintenance, and well-being of the dog, Sir Barks-a-Lot Beaumont. Funds are to be used for premium veterinary care, including semi-annual checkups, dental work, and any necessary procedures. For nutrition, a specified high-quality brand of food or its equivalent and approved treats. For grooming, bi-weekly professional grooming sessions. For comfort, a monthly allocation for dog walking services if the trustee is unable to provide adequate exercise, and for replacement of bedding and toys as needed." She looked up. "These are reasonable stipulations for the care of a pet. They demonstrate a clear intent to provide for the animal's welfare, not to waste the assets. This is important in negating any waste or incapacity argument." "And after?" I asked. "Upon the death of the animal, any remaining funds in the trust, after the payment of all final expenses, are to be distributed to the designated remainder beneficiary, the County Animal Rescue League. This is a recognized 501c3 charity. This final clause is crucial. It shows the assets have an ultimate, socially responsible destination. It is not a perpetual trust for a dog. It has a clear, legal endpoint." She closed the folder. "The will is simpler. It leaves the house and all tangible personal property to your son, Robert Beaumont, outright. This is a significant bequest. It demonstrates you have not disinherited your family. You have simply allocated one specific asset, the insurance proceeds, elsewhere. This further undermines any claim of undue influence or lack of capacity. A person lacking capacity does not create such a balanced, logical plan." I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, cool and clean, and the likelihood of a successful challenge? Valerie leaned back in her chair. "Extremely low, vanishingly low. To overturn a trust, one must prove incapacity, fraud, or duress. Your medical records show no cognitive issues. We have a notarized letter from your physician, conducted at the time of the trust's creation, affirming your sound mind. There is no evidence of fraud. As for duress..." She almost smiled. "Who exactly would be pressuring you to leave $250,000 to your dog? It's an argument that defeats itself. The daughter-in-law could try to sue, but she would be wasting her own money. No competent attorney would take it on a contingency. She'd have to pay hourly, and she would lose." I nodded. This was the reassurance I needed. Not emotional, but legal, fact-based. "There is one more thing," I said. I opened my portfolio and handed her a sealed envelope. "This is a personal letter to Gloria. It is not a legal document. It explains my reasoning, my wishes for Barks's daily life, his favorite walking route, how he likes his belly rubbed. It is to guide her heart, not the trust. I would like you to keep it with the file, to be delivered to her upon my death, alongside the legal documents." Valerie took the envelope. "I'll place it in the vault. It's a good idea. It personalizes the intent." She placed it inside her folder. "Eleanor, this is a well-constructed plan. It protects your wishes precisely. It is an act of deliberate, clear-eyed stewardship. You should feel confident." "I do," I said, and I meant it. We spoke for a few more minutes about administrative details. She gave me copies of everything, including a memorandum summarizing the legal strengths of the arrangements. I placed them in my portfolio. As I stood to leave, Valerie came around the desk. "For what it's worth," she said, her professional demeanor softening just a fraction. "I've seen a lot of families torn apart by much less. What you've done here, it takes clarity and courage." "Thank you, Valerie." I left her office, the portfolio held securely under my arm. The elevator descended. The legal architect had reviewed the blueprints. Every wall was load-bearing. Every door was locked. The fortress was not just in my mind or in my desk drawer. It was here, in this building, filed with the county recorder, held in a vault. It was real. As I stepped out into the midday sun, I felt lighter. The weight was not gone, but it had been shifted from my shoulders onto the solid, unassailable ground of the law. The confidence I carried home from the lawyer's office was a private solace. I placed the portfolio back in the desk drawer, the key once again secure in my pocket. The house felt different, as if the legal clarity had physically reinforced its walls. 2 days passed in quiet routine. I gardened. I read. I took Barks for longer walks, enjoying the spring air. My phone remained off. I knew the silence would not last. On the third afternoon, a car approached slowly. I recognized the engine's particular rumble. Robert's sedan pulled into the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as he got out, alone. He stood by the car for a minute, looking at the house. He was carrying a paper bag. He walked to the door and rang the bell. I let him wait a moment before answering. When I opened the door, his face was drawn, his eyes tired. He managed a faint, apologetic smile. "Hi, Mom. Robert." He held up the bag. "I brought lemonade, the good kind from that farmer's market you like." It was a peace offering, a specific one, recalling a pleasant memory. "That was thoughtful," I said. I stepped aside to let him in. "Can we sit in the garden? It's nice out." I nodded. I fetched 2 glasses and followed him out to the small patio table, shaded by a flowering cherry tree. Barks settled in a sunny patch nearby. Robert poured the lemonade, the ice clinking. The silence between us was not hostile, but heavy with unsaid things. He took a long drink, then set his glass down. He didn't look at me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his voice low. "A lot of remembering, too." I waited. "Chloe. She's staying with her sister for a few days. The kids are with me. She's angry. She feels betrayed." He finally looked up. "But that's not what I came to say. I came to say I'm sorry." I took a sip of the lemonade. It was tart and sweet, just as I liked it. "For what, specifically?" He let out a slow breath. "For not seeing it. For letting her... for participating in the idea that you owed us something. When she said that about counting on the insurance, it was like a light switched on. I saw the whole picture, and it was ugly. I'm ashamed." "You should be," I said, my tone even. It was not a rebuke, but a statement of fact. He flinched, but nodded. "I am. I kept telling myself she was just being practical, that she cared about you. But that night, when she brought the kids like that, it wasn't about you. It was never about you. It was about the money. I was too comfortable to look closely." "Yes," I said. "When did you know?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I think I always sensed a transaction where there should have been affection, but the knowing became clear over time. It was in the questions about property taxes, the comments about downsizing. The way she looked at the silverware your father gave me, not as heirlooms, but as assets. The insurance question was simply the most blatant. He rubbed his forehead, and I just nodded along. I didn't want to cause trouble. I wanted everyone to get along. Your desire for peace allowed a war to build under your feet, I observed. I see that now. He looked at his hands. I went to see a lawyer, too, not to challenge you, just to understand. A colleague recommended someone. I asked what it would take to contest your plan. A cold sliver of anger surfaced, but I kept my face neutral. And? He looked up, his expression pained. He said exactly what yours probably told you. It's airtight. He said anyone trying to fight it would be throwing money away. But that's not the point. The point is, I asked. I considered it, even for a second, and that makes me part of the problem. His honesty was unexpected. It was the first real, unvarnished truth he had offered in years. I felt the cold anger begin to thaw, just a little. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know I'm not here to manipulate you. I'm here to apologize, to say I understand why you did it, not just the legal thing, but the statement of it. You were saying, this is mine and I decide, and we were acting like it was already ours. It was a boundary, I said, one that should not have needed to be drawn so starkly. I know. He was silent for a moment. What happens now? With us? That was the question. I looked at him, my son, who had been a sweet boy and had become a man who chose the path of least resistance until it collapsed beneath him. There was genuine remorse in his face. It was not enough, but it was a start. I cannot have a relationship with Chloe, I said plainly. That bridge is burnt. She revealed her character, and I believe her. I will be civil for the children's sake, but she's not welcome in my home. He swallowed hard but nodded. I figured. As for you, I continued, you are my son. That does not change, but trust is not an entitlement. It is earned. You have damaged mine. Rebuilding it will require more than lemonade and an apology. It will require you to be a different man in your own home, to set boundaries of your own, to protect your children from learning that love is a balance sheet. He looked down, his shoulders slumping under the weight of the requirement. I don't know if I know how to do that. Then you will learn, I said, not unkindly, or you will fail. That is your choice. My choices are already made. They are firm. We sat in the garden for another half hour. The conversation moved to safer ground, the children's school projects, a problem with his car. It was strained, but it was a connection. It was a thread we were tentatively picking up. When he left, he didn't try to hug me. He simply said, "Thank you for talking to me, Mom. I'll call you soon. Goodbye, Robert." I watched him drive away. The apology had been made. It was not perfect, but it was real. The son had begun his reckoning. The path to any redemption was long and uncertain, but the door, at least, was no longer locked. I turned and went inside, the faint taste of lemonade still on my tongue, a mixture of sour and sweet. The tentative peace following Robert's visit lasted 4 days. I kept my phone on and he called once, a short, awkward conversation about a work project. It was a start. I busied myself with ordinary tasks. I was in the kitchen, sorting through a pile of mail, when I saw a familiar car approach. It was not Robert's sedan. It was Chloe's smaller, sportier coupe. She was alone. She parked and sat in the car for several minutes. I continued sorting the mail, placing bills in one pile, junk in another. I did not go to the door. Finally, she emerged. She was dressed not in her usual crisp attire, but in casual jeans and a simple sweater. Her face, as she walked to the porch, was pale, her eyes downcast. She looked, for all the world, like a woman weighed down by regret. She rang the bell. I finished separating a coupon flyer before walking to the door and opening it. We regarded each other through the screen. "Eleanor," she said, her voice soft, trembling slightly. "May I come in, please? I need to talk to you." I unlocked the screen door and held it open. She entered, her movements subdued. She smelled of perfume, something floral and light. She did not go to the living room but stood in the foyer, wringing her hands. It was a performance, but a more skilled one than her previous anger. "Would you like to sit?" I asked, leading the way to the living room. I took my usual chair. She sat on the edge of the sofa, perched as if ready to flee. "I don't even know where to begin," she started, her eyes filling with tears. They were perfectly timed, welling up but not yet falling. "The last week has been a nightmare. I haven't been able to sleep. I've been so sick with shame." I waited, saying nothing. "I acted horribly," she continued, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She let it fall, a classic technique. "The things I said, I don't even recognize myself. It was just the shock, I think, and stress. Robert and I have been under so much financial pressure with the kids, and the thought of their future, it just made me panic. I said terrible, unforgivable things." She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "I am so sorry, Eleanor, truly from the bottom of my heart. I love you. You're my husband's mother. You're the grandmother of my children. The idea that I made you feel like a transaction." She choked on the word, pressing a hand to her mouth. "It makes me sick." The apology was comprehensive. It blamed stress, shock, and maternal fear. It invoked love and family. It was designed to be disarming, to pathologize her greed as a temporary lapse born of noble concern. It was her last gambit. "I understand you've been under stress," I said, my tone neutral. "You do?" Hope flickered in her wet eyes. "Oh, thank God. I was afraid you'd never speak to me again. I don't blame you if you can't forgive me, but I had to try. For Robert, for the kids. We're a family." She leaned forward, her expression achingly sincere. "And that's why I'm begging you to reconsider. Not for me, never for me, but for the family's future, for the kids. This policy, it could secure so much for them. It could take away this constant worry that's been eating me alive and made me act so terribly. It could bring us all together again." There it was, the pivot. The apology was the wrapper. The request to change my plans was the product inside. She was not here to make amends. She was here to renegotiate the terms of my surrender. "The children's future is their parents' responsibility," I said calmly, "as it was mine and James's for Robert. You and Robert are both employed. You own a home. The children are healthy. Their future is not precarious." The tears stopped, though her face remained sorrowful. "But this could make it better. It could give them opportunities we can't. Please, Eleanor, think about it. This decision. It feels so final, so punitive. Is that really what you want? To punish all of us, especially those innocent babies, for my momentary lapse?" She was reframing my autonomy as a punishment, a classic tactic. "My decision is not a punishment, Chloe. It is a choice. It was made before your momentary lapse, as you call it. The lapse simply confirmed the wisdom of that choice." Her composure wavered for a microsecond, a flicker of frustration in the eyes. She smoothed it over. "I know you're angry. I deserve that anger. But please, can we just talk about the practicalities? Maybe we could meet with your lawyer together? We could set up a trust for the children with some of the funds, and the rest could still go to your dog. A compromise?" She was probing for a weakness, for a door she could wedge open. The mention of a joint meeting with my lawyer was particularly bold. "There will be no meeting," I said. "There will be no compromise. The documents are final. I have explained my reasons to Robert. He understands the legal reality, even if he struggles with the emotional one." Her face hardened then, the mask of contrition slipping. The tears dried up as if by magic. "He came to see you." "What did he say?" That is between my son and me." Her hands clenched in her lap. The sorrow was gone, replaced by a cold, focused intensity. "You're going to destroy this family over a principle. You're going to let a dog come between a grandmother and her grandchildren." "You are the one who created the between, Chloe," I said, my voice still level. "You did it the moment you saw me as a portfolio instead of a person. The dog is merely the beneficiary of my will. You are the author of this discord." She stood up abruptly, the performance officially over. The false humility was gone, leaving the familiar, calculating anger. "You are a bitter, lonely old woman. You're pushing everyone away so you can die alone with your mutt. And you know what? Fine. But don't you dare pretend this is about justice or autonomy. It's about spite. Pure, simple spite." I remained seated, looking up at her. "You are entitled to your interpretation. It changes nothing." She stared at me, and I saw the final realization dawn in her eyes. There was no lever to pull, no button to press. The legal fortress was impervious, and my resolve was part of its structure. She had played her last card, the emotional, repentant daughter, and it had failed. Without another word, she turned and walked out. Her steps were quick and sharp on the hardwood, a staccato beat of defeat. The front door closed, not with a slam, but with a firm, final click. I listened to her car start and drive away, faster than necessary. The quiet of the house settled back around me, deeper and more complete than before. The last gambit had been played and it had lost. The victory was not dramatic. It was quiet, absolute, and mine. The click of the front door was a period at the end of a long, ugly sentence. I remained in my chair for a while, listening to the quiet. It was a different quality of quiet now. It was not the tense silence before a storm or the hollow silence after an explosion. It was the deep, settled quiet of a matter being conclusively resolved. Chloe had shown me every card in her hand. Anger, manipulation, false contrition. I had seen them all, and none had changed a thing. I stood up. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, casting long, warm rectangles on the floor. I felt a sense of clarity so profound it was almost physical. It demanded acknowledgement, not with shouting or tears, but with a deliberate, private ritual. I went to the kitchen. I opened the freezer and took out 2 steaks I had been saving. They were expensive, thick-cut filet mignons, each wrapped in white paper. I placed one on the counter to thaw slightly. The other I set aside. I then went to the pantry and selected a bottle of red wine, a nice Cabernet Sauvignon James had liked. I opened it to let it breathe. I preheated the oven for the potatoes. I scrubbed 2 small Yukon Golds, pierced their skins, and rubbed them with oil and salt. I placed them on the rack. The routine was methodical, calming. I set the small kitchen table for one, using the good china, the simple white plates with the silver rim that were a wedding gift. I took out a crystal wine glass. For the other place, I set a large, durable ceramic bowl on the floor. When the potatoes were nearly done, I began on the steaks. I patted the first one dry and seasoned it generously with salt and pepper. I heated a cast-iron skillet until a drop of water sizzled and vanished. I added a small amount of oil, then placed the steak in the pan. The sound was immediate and satisfying, a fierce, confident sizzle. The rich, savory smell filled the kitchen. I seared it for 3 minutes on each side, then finished it in the oven to a perfect medium rare. I removed it to a plate to rest. I then prepared the second steak. This one I cooked simply. A quick sear on each side in the same hot pan, just enough to brown the outside while leaving the center cool and red. Rare. Very rare. I placed it on a cutting board and sliced it into thin, bite-sized strips. I let the pieces cool. I took the first steak, now rested, and plated it beside one of the baked potatoes, adding a pat of butter and a sprinkle of chives. I poured a glass of wine. I then placed the strips of rare steak into the ceramic bowl on the floor. "Barks," I called. He had been watching the entire process from his bed in the corner, his nose twitching at the smells. At his name, he stood and ambled over, his tail wagging slowly. He sniffed the air, then the bowl. He looked up at me, as if for confirmation. "It's for you," I said. "Go ahead." He needed no further encouragement. He began to eat, his movements careful at first, then with happy, contented chews. The sound of his enjoyment was a soft, rhythmic crunching. I sat at the table. I did not eat immediately. I looked at the meal, at the wine, at my dog enjoying his extraordinary dinner. I lifted my glass. I did not speak aloud. The toast was in my mind. To James, for the life we built. I took a sip. The wine was deep and complex. To myself, for remembering who built it. Another sip. To Barks, for his loyalty which asks for nothing but kindness in return. I cut a piece of the steak. It was tender, perfectly cooked. The flavor was rich and satisfying. Each bite was a conscious act of celebration. I ate slowly, listening to Barks finish his meal. He licked the bowl meticulously, then came to sit beside my chair, resting his head on my knee. I fed him one small, buttery piece of potato from my plate. He took it gently. The meal was not about extravagance. It was about symbolic value. It was about using my resources in that moment exactly as I saw fit. It was about providing a moment of pure joy to a creature I loved and savoring my own peace. The money from the insurance policy would one day ensure a lifetime of such care for him. This dinner was a down payment, a promise kept in advance. After I finished, I cleared my single plate and washed the pan. I put the wine away, the bottle half full for another day. The ordinary cleanup was part of the ritual, grounding the celebration back into the fabric of daily life. I turned on the radio in the living room, tuning it to the jazz station James had loved. A piano piece, slow and elegant, filled the room. I sat in my armchair. Barks heaved a sigh of contentment and lay at my feet, his belly full. There was no one to witness this quiet triumph, no audience to applaud. That was the point. This victory was not for show. It was for me. It was the knowledge that I had faced down a subtle, persistent form of predation and had won, not with a shout, but with a will and a trust fund. I had protected my legacy from those who would see it only as currency. I had converted it instead into a testament of care. As the piano music played, I felt a smile touch my lips. It was not a smile of gloating. It was a smile of profound, unassailable satisfaction. The revenge was complete, and it tasted like a perfectly cooked steak and the grateful silence of a contented dog. The house was not just quiet, it was at peace. And so was I. The peace of my celebration dinner lingered into the next morning, a warm undercurrent beneath the ordinary tasks of making coffee and taking Barks for his walk. The world outside my house, however, had begun to shift in subtle ways. Stories, especially salacious ones about money and family, have a way of leaking out. They do not need an official announcement. They travel through glances, through carefully phrased questions, through the quiet network of women who notice everything. My first indication came at the grocery store 2 days later. I was in the produce section selecting avocados when I felt a presence beside me. It was Maeve Robinson, a widow from 2 streets over. We were not close friends, but we were friendly. We knew each other's histories. "Eleanor," she said, her voice warm. She picked up a lemon, inspecting it without looking at me. "I heard you had a bit of a to-do with that daughter-in-law of yours." I placed an avocado in my cart. "Did you?" She nodded, finally turning her keen eyes on me. "My niece works at the law firm that handled the Henderson estate next door. She mentioned talking to a paralegal from Jenkins and Associates. Word gets around, especially when it's a good story." "I suppose it is a story," I acknowledged. She gave a soft, approving chuckle. "Honey, it's a manifesto. Leave me alone or I'll leave it all to the dog. I love it." She patted my arm. "Good for you. We put up with too much, thinking it's peace. It's just slow surrender." She moved on with her cart, leaving me with the avocados and the understanding that my private stand was now communal property. I was not upset. I had known it would happen. I had simply expected it to take longer. The next evidence was at my weekly bridge club. The group consisted of 4 women, all around my age, all of whom had navigated widowhood, difficult children, or financial anxieties. We met at Helen's house. The usual chatter about recipes and grandchildren proceeded normally for the first hour. Then, during a lull as Helen dealt a new hand, Margot, the most outspoken of us, set her cards down. "All right, Eleanor. Spill. The whole neighborhood is buzzing. Did you really cut your son off and give everything to your dog?" The other 2 women, Helen and Patricia, did not pretend to be shocked by the question. They leaned in slightly, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. "I did not cut my son off," I clarified, arranging my cards. He inherits the house and everything in it. I changed the beneficiary on a single life insurance policy. To my dog, yes. Margot's face broke into a wide, triumphant grin. "Ha! I knew it. Sylvia at the library said it was a trust fund with provisions for gourmet dog food. Is that true?" "The trust specifies quality nutrition and veterinary care," I said, my tone factual. Patricia, usually very quiet, shook her head slowly, a smile playing on her lips. "My Roger's son asked us to sign over the deed to our condo as a safety measure last year. We said no. He didn't speak to us for 3 months. I wish I'd had the guts to tell him we were leaving it to a cat." "It's not about the guts," Helen said, picking up her cards. "It's about the paperwork. Eleanor did the paperwork. That's what makes it brilliant. It's not an emotional threat. It's a financial fact. They can't argue with a fact." The conversation moved on, but the atmosphere had changed. Looks of solidarity were exchanged across the table, nods of understanding. I had become, in their eyes, a standard bearer, a woman who had used the system to draw a line in the sand, a line every one of them had felt pressured to erase in their own lives. Robert called me that evening. He sounded weary but clear. "Chloe is not taking it well. She went to a bridge luncheon with some of her friends today. She came home furious. Apparently the mother of one of her friends is in your bridge club." "I see," I said. "She said they were laughing about it, treating it like some heroic stand. She feels humiliated." "She humiliated herself, Robert. I merely provided the facts." He was silent for a moment. "I know, and part of me is glad people see it, that they see her. But it's making everything at home very difficult." "That is the consequence of her actions," I said, not unkindly but without cushioning the truth. "They are no longer private. The community now knows her character, as you now know it. She will have to decide how to live with that knowledge." The ripple effect continued. At the post office, an older gentleman I knew only by sight gave me a respectful nod. In the waiting room at the veterinarian, a woman my age leaned over and whispered, "My daughter-in-law heard about you. She brought me a casserole last night without asking for anything. First time in 10 years. Thank you." The story had been sanitized, stripped of its personal pain and distilled into its empowering essence. A woman, late in life, refusing to be a piggy bank. The details of Chloe's cruelty were implied, not stated. The focus was on the elegant legal solution. I had not sought this notoriety, but I did not shy from it. It served as a social shield. Chloe could not attack me now without attacking a symbol, and symbols have defenders. I understood then that this was part of the justice, the final unplanned layer of my revenge. It was not the loss of money that truly punished Chloe. It was the loss of social standing, the subtle shunning, the knowing looks from women whose opinions she had worked to cultivate. Her greed had been exposed, not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, where the verdict was delivered in whispers and approving smiles directed at me. My quiet celebration had been private. This public affirmation was its echo, resonating through the community, reinforcing the walls I had built. I had not just secured my legacy for Barks, I had inadvertently given voice to a quiet resentment shared by many, and in doing so had forged a different kind of insurance policy, one made of respect and unspoken alliance. The ripples would reach shores I would never see, and that was perfectly all right. The ripples of the story, as I learned, eventually settle. The community's interest, while gratifying in its solidarity, is not a daily occurrence. Life returns to its routines. The true measure of my actions was not in the whispered approval at the grocery store, but in the quiet of my own home, day after day. It is here, in these ordinary moments, that the final assurance of my choice is most evident. It is early evening now, the time I have always favored. I am sitting on the porch in the rocking chair James built for me when we first moved in. The wood is smooth from decades of use. The sun is beginning its descent, casting a warm, golden light across the lawn. The air is cool, carrying the scent of cut grass and the first hints of evening blooms. Barks is at my feet, asleep, his side rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His graying muzzle rests on his paws. He is content. I hear a car before I see it. Robert's sedan turns onto our street and slows in front of the house. He parks and gets out, carrying a small paper bag. He is taken to visiting every Sunday afternoon, sometimes with the children, sometimes alone. Today, he is alone. He walks up the path, a tentative smile on his face. It is less strained now, more natural. "Hey, Mom," he says, his voice soft in the quiet evening. "Robert, I didn't expect you today." "I was driving back from taking the kids to a movie. Thought I'd stop by." He holds up the bag. "Brought you some of those almond cookies from the bakery." "Thank you. Sit down." He takes the other chair, the wicker one that creaks. He looks out at the yard, at the fading light. We sit in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. This is new, this ease. It is not the oblivious comfort of before, but a quieter, more honest companionship built on the acknowledgement of what almost was lost. "How are the children?" I ask. "Good. Emma has a science project on planets. She's decided Pluto got a raw deal." He smiles. "Jason is obsessed with learning to ride his bike without training wheels. He falls a lot, gets right back up." "They're resilient," I observe. "They are." He pauses. Chloe sends her regards. This is the formula we have settled upon. He acknowledges her existence. I acknowledge the message. We do not discuss her. She is not part of this space. The children come with him on alternate visits. They are young. They adapt. They run in the garden, play with Barks, eat cookies at the kitchen table. They do not ask difficult questions. This arrangement, while imperfect, is functional. It is the best possible outcome from the wreckage. "How are you, Mom?" he asks, turning to look at me. His concern is genuine now, untainted by any secondary agenda. "I am well, Robert. Very well." "You look it," he says, and I believe he means it. The constant low-grade tension that used to hum in the background of my life is gone. The peace shows. We talk for a while about nothing important. The city's plans to repave our street, a new restaurant he tried, a book I am reading. The conversation is light, undemanding. It is the kind of talk that fills space pleasantly, without weight. After half an hour, he stands. "I should get back. Homework and bedtime routines wait for no man." "Of course. Thank you for the cookies." He leans down and kisses my cheek. The gesture is brief, but it is sincere. "I'll call you Tuesday. Maybe bring the kids by next weekend? I'd like that." I watch him walk to his car, lift a hand in farewell, and drive away. The street is quiet again. The golden light has deepened into orange and pink at the edges of the sky. I look down at Barks. He has opened one eye to watch Robert leave, then closes it again, secure in the knowledge that his world is unchanged. His future is secure, written in trust documents and cared for by a woman who loves dogs. He will never want for anything. That knowledge is a deep, abiding satisfaction. I think of Chloe. somewhere in her own home, nursing her humiliation and anger. Her greed has cost her. It has cost her the effortless respect she once commanded in her social circle. It has cost her the unthinking devotion of my son. It has, most importantly, cost her any claim on the moral high ground or on my assets. She is now a cautionary tale in our community, a woman who tried to cash in too early and was left with nothing but the revelation of her own character. I feel no pity. I feel no anger. I feel nothing toward her at all, which is the most complete form of dismissal. My thoughts turn to James. I can almost feel him in the empty rocking chair beside me, a quiet, approving presence. We built this life with our hands and our hearts. I have protected its integrity. I have ensured that the fruits of our labor will not be squandered on entitlement, but will perform one last act of pure, uncomplicated care. The sun dips below the rooftops. The sky is a wash of violet and deep blue. A few early stars appear. The air grows cooler. I place my hand on Barks's head, and his tail thumps once against the porch floor without him opening his eyes. This is the contentment I engineered. It is not a dramatic happiness, but a profound and steady peace. The revenge is complete, but it has faded into the background, a resolved chapter. What remains is this: the house James and I bought, the garden we planted, the son we raised who is, slowly, finding his way back to himself, and the loyal creature who shares my quiet moments. My legacy is not a sum of money. It is this right here, the autonomy to sit on my own porch at the end of my own day in perfect, unassailable peace. I rise slowly. Barks gets to his feet, stretches, and waits for me. Together we go inside. I close the door against the gathering dusk. The house is warm, familiar, and entirely mine. There is nothing left to prove and no one left to fight. The story is over.